Okay. We'll get started with this stuff. Probably mentioned this to a lot of you last time if you were here last time. Anybody new or wasn't here last time?
I wasn't here last time, but I watched part of it on the webcast thing.
I don't know if you saw this part, but basically have opened up the idea of contributors. So contributors to the meetup. I did a much better job at this last time, but the idea is I need help, and we can all contribute some way that we are passionate about. So Daniel is doing video, which I think he's got going.
Right.
Yeah. Is it live streaming or is it just recording?
No, it's just recording.
Okay, that's good.
If I live stream, the computer just shuts down.
Oh, nice.
Do
That
you
sounds
need help
about
with
right.
like an audio
We'll just
thing?
fix it.
I might have a lavalier mic that would work with your laptop.
Yeah. I have a nice mic that I can bring in as well.
Okay.
I have a mic over there. So much one.
Where?
Fuzzy thing.
I know it's
Oh.
to hold the.
Oh, okay. Hopefully it's-
Clip-on one.
I don't know.
I mean, we can. Oh, it doesn't reach all the way.
Is yours
No.
like a clip-on one?
No.
Okay. Those are, I know some people hate doing
I like the football ones, but anyway. Okay, so yeah, he is kind of taking on the video streaming portion of it. We also need help with like somebody to help run the Twitter account or the, I don't know, any sort of account, social account.
Nobody signed up for that one here? I thought
Nobody
so.
signed up for anything.
All right. I thought
Not even Dan.
Volunteer.
Well, do you see my setup?
No
I'll try and
Hey, better than nothing, right?
Exactly. People like write things about the people of our group. So if you want to be a biographer, you can go through and find out who does what and what they're passionate about, and kind of share that story if you want to. All sorts of stuff. And if you don't see something on here that is what you're interested in, feel free to add your name to create a new file and add your name to it. I was thinking of one today, and it's off my mind. It left me. But yeah, that's what that is. That's HillCountryJS/contributors. Pull requests is how you would pull requests or issues is how you'd open stuff. And that's that. Here's your.
Kevin, just make him interesting.
What? Yes. This is all why you're here. I don't know. Okay. This is Space City JS. This is a conference going on in Houston next week, next Saturday, on the 28th, I think. And it's hard to see on here. Do you want to honk the lights?
Definitely.
Yeah. Good lighting. Okay, that's much easier to see. Yeah, it is organized by the people who do the Houston JavaScript Meetup. So it's a one-day event on Saturday. Ignore the fact that I'm speaking there because that will just ruin it for you. The more important part is the pre-party, which is at St. Arnold's, the brewery there. So $25, you get to go to St. Arnold's and have unlimited beer, which is not going to go well for my talk in the morning. But they've got some cool people speaking down the road. I mentioned that. That's next Saturday. Later on, TXJS 2015 was announced. This is in Austin, and I guess it's July 24th. And they're selling tickets. They're doing another round on Friday at noon. So if you are,
First round sold out like.
yeah, it's a pretty popular one. We had a past speaker, Alex Sexton, runs it. Good people. So that's that one. Another one coming to Austin in fall is SaaSConf, if you're into SaaS. They also have a call for proposals open. I did a workshop there last year, and they're great people. Highly recommend them. So they're open through May 20th for if you want to do any speaking, especially on SaaS, or if you want to submit a workshop idea there as well for anything. So they're looking for speakers. And this is the last conference in Texas that I'll mention. This says 2014. They've actually they're going to do 2015 up in Dallas. Another one-day conference. I believe their call for speakers is open. If I can figure out.
It says 14, it's 2015.
Yeah.
It says 2015 up there.
Yeah, they haven't updated it quite yet. Anyway, it is happening. They have a call for speakers. Just email them what you're thinking about if you want to do speaking. And if you do submit a session proposal for any of these, please feel free to present here as your first try, your first attempt. And as long as things go well, you can at least fail here and then not fail there, hopefully. Anyway, that's in the fall. I think it's sometime in October. I don't think they have a date set yet, but
October 20th.
October
Very top.
They have a date set. Hey, it's October. Okay, so yeah, they're still looking for speakers. Okay, that's that. Geekdown is our sponsors. They provide pizza. I think they're still paying for beer, although I need to reimburse them. Anyway, this is their job board. If you are looking, geekdown.jobboard.io, and then they're upstairs on one of the floors up there. And then Four Kitchens is also helping sponsor. That's where I work. That's all you need to know as far as sponsorship goes. And these are upcoming events at Geekdom. If you are interested in other events, this is members.geekdom.com/events. So, hey, look, there's us. I think, yeah, SA Web Dev goes on the day after ours. And another SA Web Dev. I thought there was one. I thought there was another
We have a
one.
Ruby Rebels.
I think that'll be next week.
Yeah.
There's JDev Meetup. I thought that would be a time, but I guess it's every Tuesday night. Is the JDev, which is like I guess startup kind of stuff or just general development. Anyway, that's there. Do I have anything else? Come on. Nope, nothing else. Okay, those are the announcements. Before we break for beer and pizza, if you haven't got it already, does anybody have anything they'd like to mention or talk about? Open the floor for 5 minutes or so. Did y'all hear IE's retiring? IE going away, in theory, to be replaced.
That sounds like good news.
Yeah,
Long live Spartan.
right. Spartan will come in.
Well, we'll see.
Anybody? Okay, well, y'all are good at talking, so. Please go have drinks and refreshments. We'll break for like 2 minutes, and then I'll get started. Yeah, go for it.
We got Free Tail Ale, it's just a regular beer for those who aren't that adventurous. I got Spirulina Wit, which is it's a green beer.
It's good.
It's like one of the top 10 weirdest beers, but it's really good. It's got like an algae in it. It sounds disgusting, but it tastes really good. And then I have a Belgian brown which I've never heard of before, but it's pretty good. I'm drinking right now.
Good options.
Anybody working on anything cool?
Presentations.
Presentations. I guess we'll see that in
Awesome thanks.
Come on. You don't need a drink because it makes you nicer. Jeez. What did I do? I bet it's switched inputs. Here. No, it's not. It actually goes off. Oh, I guess it is full screen. It's just off the map. Who's that?
Background looks nice.
Yeah, I like that one. It's Weather Underground. They have a series of weather-related stuff. Anybody know what those type of clouds are?
Tornadoes.
Weird one.
Not quite tornadoes.
Half tornadoes.
UFOs. They're lenticular clouds.
That's very cool. Where do you get that?
Wonderground? Weather Underground? Is that the show now? Where do we go? Photos? No. More? No. Where would it be? Station. I have it here. Wonder. Gallery. There we go. So then, lenticular clouds right there.
Cool.
You see a lot of these spots after thunderstorms and stuff. They're the fun ones. It's when this air sinks. I'll just do my presentation on weather tonight. It's going to be much more entertaining for
Sounds
me.
like it. What's their post? That's what it is. Wonderground weather.
Wonderground.com/weather-posters is where you get it.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's like art.
Yeah, I know. It's like,
I like it. It could be weather or like anything else. That would be cool.
It's like Art Deco style.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting much out of these posters. Like, I saw it earlier and I was like, no. But it's got some neat style to them. I like how it's like an advertisement. Could be weather. Okay. Tonight, I'm talking about open source as a project model for internal work. Oh, before I start that, I remembered something. If you do go to that contributors website, there is a link to Gitter.io. So if you want to do any chatting in the background while I present, feel free to go here. Gitter.im/HillCountryJS/contributors. We'll get you there. And type stuff there, and it will be available.
I was gonna say, it'd be cool if we had like a Slack chat for like all the different meetups.
So this is open for the rest. It's basically Slack,
Yeah.
but for our group. But this is open for anytime you want to show up on it. Not too many people actively monitor it or are on it, but that's the link to the slides.
This way we can make fun of you while you're talking.
Exactly. I've opened myself up. Hey, wow, I could just do the presentation from here. As long as y'all don't talk. If you want to get a sneak peek, those are the slides that are on speaker deck. But yeah, that's gitter.im. Can I zoom in? Can I zoom in? No? Sorry, trying to zoom in. I'll paste it on the meetup page if you. Actually. Adding it to the meetup as a comment. Okay, that's it. Okay, tonight I'm talking about open source as a project model for internal work. Internal work being projects that you're working on inside your day-to-day work, your full-time job, and open source as a project model for it. So I'm not saying that you have to have your work has to be open source, but that we can follow some of the ideas that the open source field follows. Okay, this is me. This is my 2 sons and my wife. This was winter solstice. We went up to a park and read some stories and ate some food to kind of celebrate the day. So just being goofy. You already know who I am, though, so I don't need to get into that. Okay. The idea for this talk, and basically the idea for all of the content in here, arose when a coworker and I were over many lunches between a coworker and I about basically how we can do our jobs better. A few years ago, I used to work at USAA. Most of y'all are familiar with it or actually work there. And I was on the infrastructure team there, kind of supporting the front end environment, the front end code base. And so we were having some issues that anybody who works for a large company or works for a large team kind of runs into, and we were trying to figure out how best to go about our jobs day to day. So we started to see how open source projects, how they did their job. And we noticed a few things about open source projects. Number one, they have to be really good at scaling. They have to manage, if an open source project goes big, they go really big, much bigger than an internal project that your work can get. So how do they support that user base as they grow? If you look at a project like Angular, how are they able to provide this level of support to handle issues, handle PRs, handle feature requests, handle putting on a conference? How do they do that? Secondly, they also have to rely mostly on volunteers. There are a lot of open source projects are sponsored by a company, but a lot of the contributions come from volunteers. A lot of the people that they have help out don't get paid for it. So how do they do that? How do you create a project that's welcoming enough to have somebody volunteer their time in their busy schedule? And then finally, most of them have distributed teams. Most of, just the nature of open source, you have people from around the world contributing. You're not all going to the same office every day. Even the main contributors could be in multiple companies. So how do they cope with that kind of disconnect and make sure that they can brainstorm and make decisions and all that without being in the same place? So we were talking about that. We kind of noticed some things, and we thought to ourselves, hey, this is like what we face at our work day to day. Supporting a growing team, if you start out on a new project, as you build that project and say you're on an infrastructure team or building a new app, as that project grows and you get more users, which is what you're hoping for, how do you support that? How do you balance the constant flow of drive-by questions? Hey, how do I do this real quick? Or an endless flow of emails coming into your inbox asking for help. You want to help out, but how do you do it when there's 100 people that you're trying to help out or 200 people? Most projects, it's just a fact of nature that they're understaffed. Most work projects, you're never going to have enough people working on your project. So how do you get contributors within your company outside of your project to help out when they're also, their project is understaffed? So your project is understaffed, their project is understaffed. How do you get anything out of your coworkers? Not to say that in a bad way, but they're busy and you kind of have to respect that. And the last part was that even a co-located team will still have physical restrictions, especially as you start to get more and more people on that team. You can't have everybody sitting right next to each other if you have 50 people on a team or 50 people on a project. So, that idea of a distributed team, you're going to have to face that reality even if you are co-located. So that comes to the next idea of how can we foster an open source culture in our workplace? How can we do the things that open source does well? How can we bring that into what we do during our day job so that we can help solve some of the problems that open source has already solved just at work? So there's 3 parts that I'm going to go through. The first is this idea of practicing empathetic code management. Basically, being nice about the way that you distribute your code, doing it in a kind way so that you aren't making the job for your users miserable. The second part is reducing the friction to contribute. We went back to like everybody's overworked, everybody's understaffed. So as much as possible, how can you make it easier for people to contribute to your project so that you don't have to resort to gimmicks and stuff, or I don't know, get into like petty politics. Hey, you're supposed to be helping me with this. Why aren't you helping me with this? You're not doing your job, kind of thing. The last part is embracing the human community at work. So even though it's work, we are all humans. And how do you build a community that supports individuals and their different talents and their different passions? How do you go about being inclusive? How do you go about not turning people away or letting politics get too heavily involved? So those are the three things I'll talk about tonight. The first one, empathetic code management, we'll jump into with the idea of a separate infrastructure code base. So most of the time when you start a new project, you have a set of common features that kind of build out of that project. Maybe that's your site template, so the header, the footer, that's going to be consistent whether you have 1 page or 10 pages or 50 pages. So even if you have multiple teams, you're going to have a common template. You also have reusable components. JavaScript is great for this sort of thing. You have accordions, you have modal windows, you have pagination, you have all these things that are going to be reused across your site on various pages. You also have common styles, just button styles, anything like that. And then, so all of this I'm terming as infrastructure code, and they usually, when you're building out your app, you have them start out living inside of the app itself. But I want to make the case that you shouldn't keep it there. You should separate it out. Now, the reason for this is that better does not always equal together. Any Jack Johnson fans here? Know the song, better's not,
Yeah,
better,
yeah.
we're always better when we're together?
It's a good song.
Yeah, okay, good.
Sorry, man.
Anyway, so why is it not good to have your infrastructure code base tied with your app code base? Well, anytime you make a change to that infrastructure code base, you're going to have to make a change. You're going to have to test all your applications. So if I change the pagination, my common pagination component, I need to test pagination on every page that has pagination on it to make sure I didn't break it. Or I can just risk breaking production, which is not something you really want to do on a regular basis. It works when you're on a small project. It works when you have 10 pages and one of them has pagination. It works maybe when 3 of them. You can take 20 minutes to do a quick regression test manually. But after that, when you have 50 pages with pagination on it and 5 different teams own those 50 pages, you have to coordinate with every single team every time you want to make a change to do your regression test just to get your code out. Because if you don't, then you're going to break their page and they're going to be mad at you. That's not a good thing. It also, so yeah, that leads to like just a longer release cycle. And longer release cycles are bad. They will slow down your code. They will just like grind everything to a halt, and you will have pain and suffering. Other part, responsibilities become vague. Say somebody on team A wants to update the pagination template, or do they have to fix or they're fixing a bug in the pagination, but to fix that they have to kind of break backwards compatibility. So do they need to update every other page that all the other teams do it, or do the other teams need to do that? And what if it takes a week to do, or if it's a hefty change? Whose responsibility is that? And who fixes bugs when they come up? And who prioritizes work and features and all that kind of stuff? So it kind of gets really messy. That's why when you get to a certain size, you really want a separate team owning your infrastructure, and you want a separate code base owning your infrastructure. And this kind of relates back to open source and the fact that you have something like jQuery is a completely separate organization from everybody who uses jQuery, as far as I know. Just to speak to my experience, when I was working at Rackspace, we were building an internal Angular framework, or an internal library of Angular components. And we had gotten about 3 different projects going They were all trying to use the same kind of common style, but we wanted them in separate separate code bases because they were on separate teams, and each team was kind of going at its own pace. Anyway, there came a point when it just became really frustrating to have to update the code in 3 places. So we decided to have myself take over the role of kind of build out a common code base that every app would pull into. This library that apps could use those components without duplicating work on their end. So even if it's just one person, the whole point of this is say, even if it's just one person doing it for 6 months, it's still better than nothing. Still better having one separate person solely responsible for framework updates, for infrastructure updates, better than not having anybody do that and just kind of have this vague role. To give you another example of why you want a separate code base, we're going to go to some GIFs, not GIFs. So say you do have a set. Oh, wait, no. Okay. Here. So yes, I've convinced you on a separate code base. I've convinced you on a separate team. Now we're going to go into managing upgrades. Say you do separate out your code base. Now you have this disconnect between your app, your application, and your infrastructure. So how do you get updates from your infrastructure out to your application? Normally you do this by pushing updates out. Everybody links to a single JavaScript file, and when that JavaScript file gets updated, their application is updated. They don't have to worry about any of that messing with versions or anything like that. That's a very bad idea, and it's tough to accept the fact that that's a very bad idea because it's so easy. All I have to do is just include this one JavaScript file, and I get updates for free. But this is going to lead to a lot of pain down the road, and I'm going to illustrate that pain with some images. So Team A is, they're working on this new feature that they've got. They're polishing it out. They spent probably 3 or 4 weeks building it out, and it relies on the infrastructure code that's already there. And they are just finishing with their development, and they're about ready to ship it. And then my notes are off. They're about ready to ship it. Except the infrastructure team just shipped their own update a few days ago, and that update had a couple breaking changes in it that are pretty major, and they're already out there. They're already in production, and now it doesn't break any functionality that Team A has because they haven't used that. This is like a new feature that uses this infrastructure feature that they already have. But they can't ship out because their code is now broken because of this infrastructure update. And this other team has also shipped their code. Team B has just shipped code that relies on the infrastructure code that just went out. So you can't just say, okay, let's just revert the infrastructure code back to the previous version, because Team B is already using that code in production. So this is where you get to Team A being in scramble mode, and like, what do we do? And the answer is work the weekend. You got to get this stuff done, and we got to get it out. We have a deadline, and so sorry, but you're gonna have to work the weekend. Now, that's not something that somebody ever wants to do, and you don't want to put your team in that position. So how could we have avoided this? It all comes back to that push state. So when I make updates to my infrastructure, I'm pushing code out onto apps. So versus doing that, there's an idea of pulling your updates down. So this is done all the time in open source. jQuery, you shouldn't use jQuery-latest because you will be in for trouble down the line when they update jQuery and they have breaking changes, and your app that you haven't touched in 6 months, your website that you haven't touched in 6 months, pulls down that change, or that change gets pushed onto them, and now it's broken, and you don't even realize it for a couple weeks until the client calls and they're pissed off. So yeah, you want to pull updates down. And the way this works is your infrastructure team pushes a version out to their server environment, but that version is brand new. It doesn't overwrite a previous version. It has its own version tag and everything. We'll get into versioning in just a few moments. But the teams themselves don't get that version until they change the version number in their either in their file, that whatever file it is that says use this version. They don't get that update until they specifically ask for it. Package managers also do this. Anytime you use package.json, you've got version numbers in there. You can use the latest, but that's, you're rolling the dice there. Okay, so what are the real benefits of this? We got back to faster iteration for the infrastructure team. They don't have to test as much, or as much all at once. If they want to make an update to their code, they use their own test suite. They have unit tests, they have midway tests or functional tests, they have their manual regression tests. They run through all this by themselves on their test base. They don't have to test every single app out there to make sure that things work. They also don't have to fix every app if it breaks, or wait for an application to fix itself before they can ship out. So that means that you can ship out code as soon as it's ready. You don't have to wait for teams to kind of be in sync with everybody else. Also, there are going to be more bite-sized versions. So when a team does want to upgrade to the latest version of the infrastructure, they don't have to do this like massive update. If it's not a breaking change, they just change the version number, and now they have the latest version. If it is a breaking change, then we get to the next point. There's just less risk of breaking production because you're not having unexpected changes occurring in your code. You're kind of separating that out. The other thing is teams now have the time to test on their own schedule. Say this team is 2 weeks into this functionality and they're about a week out from completing it. You don't want to have to interrupt their development lifecycle process to say, hey, you've got to stop work on this and you need to make sure your code's ready to go to the latest release. You can push a release out. The team says, okay, I'm going to spend a week finishing up my project, finishing up this feature, and then I'm going to upgrade. And so you can kind of separate those two out, let the teams spend their own time. This also means no working on the weekends, hopefully, because of a infrastructure change at the last minute that completely blew away your assumptions when you went in. You can also roll back. If you upgrade to a new version of the infrastructure and it breaks, you can go back to the previous version. And you can do that in your app, and you don't have to worry about other apps not being able to roll back, or they're on their own version, they can run their own thing, and you're kind of separating that out. Another feature of this is you can kind of have a longer time to test your code at a slower pace. So I want Team A. Team A is ready to upgrade. Let's upgrade. Okay, Team A found an issue. Well, I'm glad I didn't release this to everybody else. I'm glad everybody else hasn't upgraded. Let's go fix this, release a new version. Now when people upgrade, they can use this new version that doesn't have the issue, the bug in it. So you can more slowly release and take your time and kind of have pilot testers, or even you can try and do beta testers or have nightly stuff. And again, this is all based on what the open source community does. Now, that's also a drawback. Doing things slower, obviously, is going to make management kind of antsy. They're not going to want to do things slower. They're not going to want to take their time usually. They want to get things out. So you're going to have to fight this pull to go back to this, hey, let's just get features out there. I mean, we have this new infrastructure, new versions out there. Why haven't we used it yet? Why are we missing out on these neat little features? What if we have performance updates? Don't we want to get those out as soon as possible? So it's a trade-off when you switch to this model, when you pull the versions down versus having them pushed out. And it's going to be slower, and you just kind of have to accept that. There's other issues with this model, especially for front-end developers, in that you are going to introduce visual inconsistencies between your versions. if version 1.1 uses buttons that have 10 pixels of padding, and then you're going to go to version 1.2 and those buttons have 20 pixels of padding, until every team has upgraded, if you have a site that you have consumers, like people out in the world consuming, then there's going to be a visual inconsistency when they go to Team A's portion of the website, and then they go to Team B's portion of the website, and those button styles change. You have to kind of understand that and accept that. There are ways around that I'll talk about in just a second, but this is probably the biggest issue that we face as front-end developers with this model. So, yes, so you can, ways to get around this. You can plan ahead. If you know you're going to do a visual rework of your infrastructure, if you're going to edit all the forms. We did this when I was at Rackspace. We completely revamped the form inputs to make them a little bit cleaner and a little bit more apparent. And I messed up with this. I pushed a version out, and I thought that I had done the right thing. I said, okay, I'm working on this big release. It's going to be a full major version, and it's going to update the visual styles of forms. It's going to update the visual styles of the main menu and all this other stuff. And I planned ahead by letting the teams know, hey, this update is coming, hey, this update is coming. What I didn't do was synchronize each team to say, when can you get this upgrade out there? So the upgrade came, and some teams upgraded, some teams didn't. And that was a problem because there was a very vast difference in the visual look and feel of the site. So what I should have done is said, okay, I'm going to push this version out there. Nobody update until 2 weeks from now. Let's all plan to update all at the same time. That way there's no visual inconsistencies in our sites. Or 3 weeks, whatever the project keeps. So again, that goes back to the original issue of having everybody having to sync up every project and kind of work through that. But that's kind of the way you can. I don't know. If you have to deal with that once every 3 months, once every 6 months, that's an okay thing to deal with. It's put in that extra effort to save you some pain down the line. Another idea is that you could separate that very specific visual piece of it to a separate code base and do the push version, or do the push releases. Have them point to a single CSS file that gets automatically updated when a new version comes out. You can do that. I don't really recommend it because you're still going to have the issue that you face of you're pushing changes out to production that may not have been tested, and you're going to have to test across the board. Hopefully the testing is smaller because it's not as much code, but there is that issue. The other issue is it's difficult to separate your UI code from your functional code, especially if you have templates that your CSS is based off those HTML templates, your JavaScript is based off your CSS, and your HTML templates say you have like an accordion. If you update the HTML, you need to update the JavaScript, you probably need to update the CSS. So how do you really separate that out and keep them in sync? So, possible, but it's difficult. Okay, so that's the idea of empathetic code management. Be kind to your users. Don't push changes out to them that they're not asking for. Take your time with it, and don't rush. The next part is this idea of intrinsic change communication. How can we give information out for free without doing like a weekly email spam blast to all of the company? Hey, here's all the updates we've made. That just ends up being ignored by 90% of the company. So the first thing we'll talk about is versioning. We just talked about versioning, but how do you do versions? How do you do version summaries? Well, you can do it the Windows way, which you start off at 1.01, and then you go to 2, 2.5, 3, 3.1, 3, and then you jump to 95, and then you go to 98, then you go back down to ME, which isn't actually a version number, it's just an awful thing. And then you go back up to 2000, and then back down to XP, to this now 7, now 8, and then you just jump to 10 because you don't want to do 9. Backwards compatibility, I think. Yeah, you can do that, right? You can do it by dates. Ubuntu does it by dates. They do, like 12.04 is 2012, April, and then you have 12.10. They do every 6 months, they'll do a release, and they put their version numbers based on when they released. That's a possibility. I'm going to advocate for semantic versioning. And this was an idea introduced by, I think by the people who run Node, or the people who started Node, or at least it's formalized by them. But the way that they set up their versioning is they have 3 numbers. They have a major version, a minor version, and a patch. So you will increment a specific number based on what type of change it is. A major version is like completely rewriting your API or making a very large change that's going to have very vast breaking changes. If you update that major number, that's a big change. And so if somebody sees, oh, you went from, if you went from 1.1.2 to 2.0.0, that's a huge change. Angular is facing this, and what's nice about it is that they're Angular 2. Like, that's the next thing. And you know when you go from Angular 1.1 or 1.36, whatever the number that is, when you go from that version to 2.0, you know you're going to have a lot of rework. So that's where that intrinsic communication comes in. Minor is, there's probably a breaking change in there. It's not a lot. You might have to spend an hour reconfiguring something. But you should know that you are going to have to put a little bit of effort into this to make the change. And then finally, patch is, it shouldn't break backward compatibility in theory. It's just like a bug fix or some sort of small little tweak, or new functionality that doesn't affect old functionality. So if I'm the user of this infrastructure and I see you're upgrading from 0.10.35 to 0.10.36, I'm pretty confident that I can make this update without a lot of work. I trust them that they're honest in their assessment, but I do my verification. I run my regression test. I do a little bit of sanity checking to make sure everything's good. However, if I see that you're going from 10.36 to 12.0, okay, now I need to plan a little bit of work. Maybe I put a full day into this. I run a bigger manual regression test to make sure things are still working. But it's this communication. Like, I don't have to ask the author, hey, this new version, does it have any breaking changes? It's there. You know it right away from the version number. If you want to find out more about that and benefits and kind of how to do it, there's a lot of nuance to it about what's a breaking change and what isn't. semver.org is the place to come. Another idea coming from open source is this idea of node stability index. This is kind of a disclaimer for your code. Hey, I'm going to release some code and it's not 100%. It needs some testing. But it's going to live right next to this other code that's fully baked out and has a solid API. How do you, like, when somebody new comes into a project, how are you going to communicate to them without making them read through a ton of readmes or a bunch of other stuff? That's where the node stability index comes in. So they have about 6 different stabilities that they mark their components with. And they start out with 0, deprecated. Basically, this feature is stagnant and it's going away. Don't rely on it. Don't use it on new code. You can use it on old code for now, but you'll probably want to update it. The next one is experimental. This is one of my favorite ones because you can get code out there without worrying too much about it changing in the future. Hey, I want to try something out. I have like this MVP functionality that I want to get out there. I want people to try it out and test it, but it is experimental. It's going to change. There's going to be bugs, all of this. So be ready for that if you are using it. Next is unstable, which is where a good portion of your code is going to live in. It's going to be unstable as you give it 3 months or 6 months to kind of work itself out, to kind of reveal the bugs that only heavy usage can kind of reveal. But for the most part, it's past that experimental stage where a lot of backwards compatibility changes would happen. So we're gonna try and maintain backwards compatibility if we can. It might break. We'll let you know. Next one is stable. So it's been out in production for a year. No new issues are being opened with it. It's pretty stable. So you're pretty confident there that things are good. You have an API frozen, which is basically saying don't make changes to this. This is set in stone. We're not touching this. Locked, even more. Let's see what, yeah. Locked is basically, we're not touching it ever. This is not changing. It's probably going to be deprecated maybe in the future. Basically, if you have feature suggestions, open it, create a new component. This one's been out there for too long. We've used it for 3 or 4 years. We don't want to mess with it. We want to do a new component. We'll put that in experimental, and we'll try things out that way. Some kind of drawbacks with this is it's tough to keep updated. You have to set, every month I'm going to go through my components, and I'm going to update their stability based off of usage and what's happened. So if you don't update it regular, then you have all of your components as unstable or experimental, and people go and they're like, is there anything that I can actually use in this infrastructure? And they're like, oh, yeah, shoot, I should have done that. I'm saying this from experience. You just got to update it. Just set a reminder to update it regularly. It's also a little bit difficult, again, for management to swallow this because you're saying that code may not be ready for people to use. You have functionality out there, and management wants, especially infrastructure management, not to throw them under the bus, but it's just the way it is, that they want you, or they want to say, hey, look at all the work my team has done. Look at all the people using the work that my team has done. But if your team's saying, hey, don't use my code yet, or you may not want to use this, you're going to have to just face the fact that that's going to, if you have too many things in experimental or too many things in unstable, you're going to get pushback on that. And they'll either ask you, hey, can you bump that up to stable? And at which point you have to make the case of, no, it's not ready for it. We need another 3 months. Let's find a team that's willing to take on the risk of it. Say, like, hey, well, we're not going to update it, but there's a chance. So keep that in mind. The last part of this is the idea of a changelog. Again, when semantic versioning won't cover it, what's the last thing I talked about? Oh, node stability indexes. Those are like high-level things. Changelogs are very detail-oriented. You might also see like history.txt, history.md, news.txt, releases.md. These are all versions of the changelog. So if you have an infrastructure project, you should keep a changelog. And there's a whole website dedicated to why you should keep a changelog and how you should do it. Basically, what a changelog is, it's this list of curated descriptions of what's changed between versions. You'll have new features introduced, you'll have bug fixes, you'll have breaking changes all defined in there. And this makes it really easy for somebody to go to this file and say, should I upgrade to the latest version? Oh, I don't even use that component, so I'm fine. I'll just upgrade right now. Or, hey, I use that component and it has a breaking change. I need a plan for 20 hours of work to make this update because it's a big change. And I use this when we upgraded from YUI 3.2 to like YUI 3.6. I looked through, they had history files for every component out there. And I went through and I checked to see, okay, are there any breaking changes? What's happened? Has it just been new features? And that really helped me to understand how much effort each component was going to take. So, really good stuff. Now, as far as generating that changelog, there's a couple different ways. You can manually generate it just by hand. When you come ready to release a version, you can type out all the things that you can try and remember. You're going to fail because you can't remember everything. So there's another way of doing it, which I really liked, which is build your changelog based off of your commit messages. So when you commit to your repo, if you are using Git or some sort of sane versioning control system, you can type in a commit message with those changes. If you follow a specific format, you can build a changelog based off of those commit messages automatically. So this is the format that AngularJS follows. They do the change type, so that could be a style change, changes to the test, changes to the documentation, a new feature, that sort of thing. The component that's changed, so say it's your pagination component, that's the component that changed, and then a description of what changed. So that might look like you changed the ruler component, or you added a new ruler component, it's a feature, and, okay. I should read the actual commit message before talking about it. You have a ruler component. You added a new feature to it, which adds inches to the ruler as well as centimeters. So pretty simple. You updated Protractor. Protractor is a test library for Angular, and you fixed a bug in it that says there was a rounding error. Or you can get really verbose. So now you have a fix to this pen component, and you're going to use blue ink instead of red ink. And you're going to spend a little bit of extra time in your git commit message to say that this is a breaking change, that it's now using blue ink instead of red, and then here's how you can change it. And here's how you can kind of migrate. And so when you run something like this repo or this tool, conventional changelog, that's going to look through all of your git commits between now and the previous version, and it's going to build this really nice changelog automatically for you. It's going to remember everything that you've done. If you do something real small, like if you change a doc, I don't think it actually adds that to the changelog, because why do you need to know that doc's changed? Probably not. So there's tools out there. You hook it into Grunt or Gulp, and now when you ship it, you build a changelog, and you have a beautiful changelog ready to go without much effort. Okay, so the last, oh man, I'm at the second section. It's been 36 minutes. I'll go faster. These next parts go faster. This part, reduce friction and contribute. And if you do want beer, it's still over there. I will not be offended if you get up. Okay, how do we reduce the friction to contribute? This is based kind of around the idea that it's better to have people think you're a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. This was spoken by a wise man known as Wilson W. Wilson on Home Improvement. He was quoting Mark Twain, but I looked up the Mark Twain quote, and that's not really Mark Twain. It's questionable of whether Mark Twain said it, but I do know that Wilson said it, so I'm quoting Wilson.
I think it was actually Lincoln.
I read a whole blog post about it, wasted 30 minutes, and they basically said, I don't know. So maybe it was Lincoln. Or Jesus? One of those. I think it's in the Bible somewhere. Anyway, the idea is you need to assume that your contributors are uncomfortable. Maybe they're not all uncomfortable. Some people, they're fine contributing code, or they've been around for a while. But if you come in assuming that people are uncomfortable contributing code, you can do a lot of things to help them feel better about what they're doing. Because if you're uncomfortable contributing code, you're going to have a hard time pressing the button to submit that pull request or to send that email. So what can we do to make things nicer for your developers? Well, the first thing you can do is let your developers mess up, but in private. Let them mess up on their own so that they're not messing up on the big stage. And to do that, we're going to use tools to prevent stupid mistakes. Automated tools like a code syntax or style validator. And then you add those to git hooks. So git hooks are a hidden feature that I didn't know about until a year ago or so, that when you try and commit code, it will execute a piece of code before you commit it. And if that piece of code fails, then it won't let you commit the code. And the same thing goes if you try to push code up to a repo, it can run another bit of code. So you can use that. You can get like JS hint or JSCS, which is a code style validator, and say before you're allowed to commit code, I'm going to run JS hint, make sure you don't have any lint errors, and I'm going to run this code style thing to make sure you don't have any code style issues that don't match our infrastructure code. And I'm going to warn you, or I'm going to say no to you. And it's much nicer to hear no in private on my computer telling me no than it is to push it up to GitHub or to the repo and get an angry email, hey, your code doesn't work. Or you have this syntax error that just completely breaks it. So you pair those up together, and now you've got a nicer way to people to figure out that they screwed stuff up. And there's good ones out there. There's JS hint, ESLint, Recess, which is Twitter CSS code style validator, JSCS, which I love. It does style validation, so like white space checking and a whole slew of things that you can do to kind of make sure that a consistent style is followed throughout your code base without you manually going in. And this is going to make code reviews infinitely easier. When I was at USA, 75% of my time during code reviews is saying add a semicolon, use single quotes instead of double quotes, and that, like, after a certain amount of time, you just have better things to do with your time, and it's not fun to be that nitpicky. You don't want to be super nitpicky in your code reviews. You want to focus on bigger stuff. So let the computer handle it. The next part of this is have automated testing. This helps you when you're building your when you're building your features, but it also helps your contributors because they can run these tests and say, I didn't screw stuff up, the tests are passing, or, oh my God, I broke every test out there. I need to rethink what I'm doing. It's like this gatekeeper that helps you, or helps your contributor know whether they messed up or not. They don't submit things and kind of go, I don't know if this is actually going to work because I don't know what to test. It also helps them know what to test. I don't know what to test, and I don't know how to test it. If you have automated testing set up, it already does that for you. And again, it makes your code review job easier because you don't have to physically pull down the branch and test things out yourself. And so if somebody contributes this code, you can say, hey, the tests are passing, so I know that this is pretty good code. I might want to do a couple verifications here or there, but I don't have to worry about it not working. This one's fun. This was a fun one when I realized it. That you should write docs, but you shouldn't expect them to ever be read. And you just have to go. You need to write documentation. You have to. But when somebody comes to you and they say, hey, how do I use this feature? And you think to yourself, I wrote about it in a freaking document and didn't read it. Just accept it. People don't have all the time in the world to read the documentation. Use the documentation more for yourself to say, hey, yeah, read the docs right here. Say it in a nice way. I've got the documentation here. I totally expect you to have not read this. It's totally fine, but go have a quick read. If you think if it's good, then good. If you find a problem with it, if it doesn't explain things to you, let me know. I want to update it. I want to make things better for somebody else. So just get in the habit of knowing that people aren't going to read your documentation. They're more for you to kind of point people along the way. Along the lines of documentation, if you can do good variable names, if you can do good code organization, then that's like the idea of self-documenting code is there for a reason. It doesn't solve everything, but don't value cleverness and like super conciseness over clarity in reading your code. If you're working on an infrastructure project, if you've got an open source project out there, you don't have the time to explain every line of code to your contributors. And your contributor doesn't have the time to figure out how this line of code works. If you have code that is 4 lines long and very clear, that's so much better than code that's 1 line code. They're 1 line long and very concise and unclear. So basically value readability over conciseness. Last part about code comments is, this was a Twitter status that I just loved. This is what your code comments turn into after time, and this is why I hate JSDoc. I think JSDoc is awful in that it repeats code that's already there. You're basically repeating yourself in your documentation. You have to copy and paste that function name in your JSDoc, which is crazy. And then the param names, you have to update, you have to copy paste your param names into your JSDoc documentation. That's crazy. Why are we repeating ourselves in our documentation? It's already there. And I know that there's some documentation generators out there that can parse the parameters and build the API, the documentation off of that. So use that. Don't just the JSDoc documentation is kind of crappy from my experience. It's really confusing. So if you are going to use JSDocs, Don't repeat yourself. Don't set yourself up for failure when you're using it. The other thing, make sure your documentation is upfront and in center. If you have a README page for a component, put it right next to your JavaScript file. So say you have a JavaScript library. Put that component documentation in a markdown file that lives in the same directory as that component. Don't put it in a wiki where nobody's going to look for it or nobody's going to know to look for it. And then when somebody updates the code, they don't know to update the wiki because you're going to end up with this. Yes, and again, don't repeat yourself in your documentation. Don't state what's already been stated. And the last part about reducing the friction to contribute is know that many people want to help. They really want to help, but they won't because they have time commitments that they need to keep. So accept that. Be comfortable with that. Encourage them, but don't get mad if they're not helping you. Don't chastise them, and don't worry too much about it. Don't go home and say, I can only get 2, 4, 6, 8. I can only get 8 people to this meetup, and we've been doing this for a year and a half. Like, what's the deal with that? We had 30 people before. What's going on? We have lives, so if you can make it to this meetup, that's awesome. If you can't, that's fine. You make your choices and don't fret too much about it. Encourage people to show up, do your thing, bring beer so people have beer, bring pizza, tweet about it, all that stuff. But don't worry too much about it. And the other part of this, personal experience, don't try gimmicks and contests to get people to contribute. That's really bad motivation in the long run. I'm reading a book about motivation, and it talks about junk food motivation. If you get people to contribute because you're doing a contest, then you've just changed their motivation factor. You've made it extrinsic motivation instead of intrinsic. They want to contribute because you have a contest. Once you pull that contest away, I don't really want to contribute anymore. Why should I contribute? You're not doing anything for me. So if you're not able to motivate people intrinsically, then maybe your project isn't as important as it isn't as important to them as it is to you. The other thing about contests is that they're really intimidating. We had a contest at USA that I thought was the coolest thing. We were going to do a pumpkin carving contest, and this was for like 200 different developers. And we were giving away really cool prizes. We were giving like a Kindle away, maybe an iPad mini for a pumpkin carving contest. I think we had 3 prizes, and we were like, oh man, we're going to have like pumpkins across the wall. We got 4 pumpkin submissions. And you know why? Everybody, myself included, who was going to carve a pumpkin thought, I'm not going to win. There's going to be 100 other people submitting pumpkins. What chance do I have? I only have 10 minutes to carve this pumpkin. So if we hadn't had the prizes there, if that wasn't my motivation to carve a pumpkin, I would have carved it and brought it in, and then this is my really shitty pumpkin. Make fun of it because I think I did a horrible job, but hey, let's have some fun. So don't rely on that kind of stuff because it just doesn't work. Especially in an open source world where you have thousands and thousands of competitors, which that's what you are. If you're doing a prize, you have competitors out there. And how, you're just one little person. How in the world are you going to beat the other 1,000 people out there? So, brings us to the last part about embracing the human community at work. People are humans. Your contributors are humans. So how can we do this? You yourself, as a infrastructure person, you're a human. Don't get good at answering emails or attending meetings. You can do that. Yes, answer emails, go to meetings, that kind of stuff. Don't get good at it. Don't be like, that's the thing that I do. I go to meetings all day. I answer emails all day. You don't want to do that. That's a bad habit. And the reason that it's specifically bad is that it builds silos of communication. Now, the only people who know about this stuff are the people who were in that meeting. Anybody else who was not in that meeting doesn't know about it. Or the people who are on this email chain. They're the only people who know about that now. And that doesn't help the longevity of your project. It doesn't help anybody who comes in tomorrow, like they start tomorrow. They didn't have a chance to go to that meeting. How are you going to let them know about that? So don't get good at it. Ways around that. You want to communicate in the open. Do all your stuff on GitHub if you can. Do like correspondence via GitHub issues. Get a chat room if you want a chat room. Slack is a great option. HipChat is a great option. Microsoft Link is a horrible option and should never be used by anybody ever. I say that for my USA folks. There's Gitter.in, which is what I mentioned earlier. That's open to any open source project. You can create a chat room that people can go to. Communicate on the open. This means that your chat history is searchable. So if somebody comes in and they don't want to ask a question because they're afraid it's been asked before, they can search the history. They can look and see, hey, has this question already been asked? Oh, look, it did. I didn't have to ask anybody. That makes the infrastructure guys, people's lives much easier because they don't have to answer as many questions. You're going to get less emails because people are going to be asking less questions. Easier for quick discussion. People can throw comments out there. They're not targeting a specific person. They don't have to send an email to a specific person. They're sending it to a bunch of people, and whoever has time can answer it. So, again, this is internal. That open source stuff. And people can lurk. People love lurking. They don't have to show their face. They can hide off in their corner, and it's fine. I love hiding off in the corner and lurking. Slack has this new feature. I don't know if you've seen it, but you can look at a room's chat messages before you join it. Because I hate when I join a chat room and it says, so-and-so, or Kevin has joined this chat room. Like, announce myself, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't really want to be out there. So it's really cool.
The bot's like, hello.
Yeah. No, stop. I'm trying to sneak in here. Work on public status updates. Use things like Trello and make that board public. Use Waffle.io is a great option for getting your GitHub issues into a task board format. I've used it. Basically, it takes your GitHub issues and it makes it a task board. Pretty cool. You can drag and drop and stuff like that. And it's free for open source projects. Working on.co is a way of publishing, hey, here's what I'm working on today. I'm working on this feature. And you basically put updates out there. If somebody's interested in it, they go out and they check your log of things and they see your task board and they say, oh, they're working on this. I can prepare for that. And they don't have to bother you. Nothing is more annoying than being bothered and having to bother somebody about what you're working on. The other part of this, pretend like you're never going to meet your users in real life. Act as if they're not in the same building as you are. Don't shut them off, but do things in a way where you don't have to see them face to face on a daily basis. Fit in time to write. Blog posts are great. Make sure you can do like weekly write-ups. Here's what we worked on this week. Here are the things where we messed up. We tried doing this and it just failed utterly. Do things like that. Have communication out there. Have a blog that you do stuff. Keep a history of decisions that you've made, because a month from now you're going to forget why you made that decision. Why did we go with YUI instead of jQuery? I don't know. I forgot. Why did you write it this way instead of that way? Document that kind of stuff. Don't just document how the code works. Talk about why it doesn't work a certain way. Be really ruthless with your prioritization, because you're going to get a lot of requests. Open source projects face this all the time. They get millions of requests, and a lot of them are good, and a lot of them don't get completed. This is harder to do at a company, because some people assume that because you're at the same company, that their priorities are your priorities. And that's just not true. And again, that goes back to management. You've got to have a good connection with your manager and with management to say, hey, we're getting a lot of feature requests, we're getting a lot of push to do this feature, but this isn't our priority. And so we have to stand our ground on that. Otherwise, and this is especially true if somebody's like, hey, I need this feature and I want you to write it. And it's for my project and it's due in a month, so write it. If you end up doing that all the time, you're never going to get anything meaningful done. This is one that scares management as well, a backlog that keeps growing and growing and growing. And that is fine to have as a project. It's fine to have a list of things that you'd like to do if you had time, but you can't. It's better to track the work it's better to have the work tracked and not done than not done and not tracked. Code reviews, when you do code reviews, if it's going to take more than an hour to respond, let them know, or maybe not more than an hour. It's going to take more than a day. Like have this SLA is a service level agreement. Basically, it's like, if you want this, you can have it back by this amount of time. So do the same thing for your code reviews. When you submit a pull request, you can have a code review within 24 hours. If it's going to be more than that, we're going to let you know. Hey, my week's busy. Hey, I'm out on vacation. I'll get back to you next week. Let them know. Also, if you see that you have a really big PR, pull request, big code change with like 1,000 lines of code change, expect it to take a longer amount of time. Expect it to take a week, at least a week, to go back and forth between the different versions. Almost there. 13 more seconds. This is one of my favorite things. Reduce variability, yet embrace it. Reduce it where you can. Reduce it where it makes sense. Code syntax, code style, release cycles, code standards. Those things are, reducing the variability in that is a good thing to do. Reducing the variability in experimentation, in trying new things out, is a bad thing to do. You need to embrace the fact that people want to try out new programming languages, or that they want to try out new libraries, or that they want to try out new experimental features. Embrace it. Be open to it. Because you want thinkers, not doers. You want people who add their own contributions, who come up with their own solutions. You don't want people who are just doing a specific task. That sounded a lot better when I was listening to the podcast that was talking about it.
Yeah, that sounds horrible, man.
Just awful. Basically, you can't force good behavior. You have to foster it. Ah, man, all that management stuff. I'm reaching an hour, so I'm going to skip through this, or not skip through it, but go hopefully a little bit quicker. This is something I haven't done yet, but I want to throw out there as an idea of defining community guidelines for your workplace. This is how the community at work works. These are the rules that we follow. These are the standards that we hold ourselves to. So SAS has their own community guidelines, which you can fork and use on your own project. I think I might try doing this for our meetup, to have these are the community guidelines for our meetup. I don't think it's basically formalizing what we already do. I don't think we have any issues with any sort of bad behavior, except sometimes people come in with alcohol from the streets and start singing. And that's not acceptable. Thankfully, they're not members of our meetup. They're just people, random people. Anyway, so their guidelines. Be considerate, open and inviting, respectful. Respectful is important because you're going to have disagreements. You're going to have quandaries to work through. Do it in a respectful manner. Don't allow your frustration or your bad day to turn into a personal attack on somebody. Don't assume, oh man, this has caught me a few times, assuming that somebody is wrong and wanting to say, you're so wrong, and like, why can't you see this? Take an extra moment to hold back what you're going to say and give it a little bit of time, and then act on it. If you do speak out and do something wrong, take responsibility for it. This is all from SAS and their guidelines. Making decisions is good. You can read these. If you do have to leave work, do it in a respectful manner. Make sure that work gets taken care of. All of that. So that's just to give you an idea of what a community guideline would look like. To sum up, practice your empathetic code management. Reduce the friction to contribute. That's a huge one. Make things easier for the people who don't have a lot of time. And finally, embrace that human community at work. Okay, so if you want to know more or read more, I am writing a series of blog posts about this. I have 3 out there already. I have a newsletter that I just opened up that when I make a new blog post, I'll email you the blog post that you can remember. That's oss.clamp.in. I just created that URL today, and I'm so proud of it. Clamping? There you go. I'm also on Twitter at clamping, but you already know that. And if you want to email me, clamping@gmail.com. So that's the newsletter. Sign up if you want to keep hearing more about this. Basically, what I talked about, but in more detail and in blog post form. So, just under an hour. So I have to give that presentation next week in 25 minutes.
Gotta cut some stuff out.
Yeah. lot to parse through. Questions, thoughts, anything?
I think there's some back and forth in the chat. That's about
Oh
it.
yeah? Okay, that's cool. Hopefully. Maybe I'll read it, maybe I won't. Anything from the chat that's worth mentioning to me?
Get some maybe suggestions.
Yeah?
They'll probably be useful.
Okay.
Just get a chuckle.
Yeah, these slides are kind of bare bones. I do need to update them. Thanks for coming. Bye. Bye. Okay, well, if y'all have stuff, then that's that. That's all the time that I'm going to take from y'all. Anything else that y'all want to share completely unrelated to this? Oh, look, there it is. Excellent. Oh, these are good. Okay. Definitely keeping these.
Good stuff.
Thank y'all for listening for an hour and paying mostly attention.